My startup failed, and here's what I learned. Test, 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 test. We're good. I think we're rolling. I have a really shitty mic, so apologies. I have a weekend getaway right now. I figured I would make this video. You clicked on it for a reason. My startup failed. Here's what I learned. So I'm gonna do a little bit of a background. 1 year ago exactly, I was just getting done with a summer internship at Northrop Grumman, which is a aerospace and defense company. So my background is engineering. I'm a mechanical engineer, and for a really long time, I was fully set on becoming an engineer and going into that industry full time. After my last summer internship, I just decided this is totally not for me. So then I started looking into startups. In October 2023, this is when I decided I needed to just surround myself with other entrepreneurs. So I found 2 other people at the college that I go to, Cooper Union, and yeah, we started meeting like once a week. Started just like talking about all the things that we're doing, and that really helped. I also started reading and meditating, and I started just like building the foundation of my life. So I started just listing out a bunch of startup ideas, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but listing out ideas is just a bad concept because I don't think you should start that way. I think you should just do kind of like weekend projects and then have that roll into a startup, instead of just saying, this is the idea I'm going to choose and then turn it into a startup. But I mean, I didn't really know that, and it's kind of just hard to intuitively guess that. But so anyways, I was writing a list, and I had like around 10 or so, and I was just narrowing it down and getting it to one. The one that I ended up picking was custom eyewear startup. So basically scanning somebody's face, determining their size, determining their character, their facial features, and then recommending a pair of glasses that were 3D printed based off those measurements. And to go into a little bit more detail on that, it was actually just using a face detection algorithm from the iPhone. The iPhone, when it actually does the facial recognition, it blasts your face with IR light, and then based off of how it bounces back, it creates like a map of your face, like a topography map. And yeah, so you get a bunch of data points basically. And if you take all those data points and you kind of calculate the distance between your eyes and figure out how wide your nose is and how wide your face is and how much seg height you would need, you essentially get everything from an iPhone that you would normally in a optometry store. Now this is on paper. It's technically possible, but it's pretty difficult to actually pull off in the real world. So my big grand plan with this startup was, why do we need physical optometry stores? Why do we need all these stores in person when you can just replace it with the iPhone camera? Now we get into the next 2 months, and the first thing I have in my notes is the fact that I got really distracted actually. So maybe about a week of working on the startup, and then kind of fizzled out after that. So that's a huge problem right off the bat. My school's pretty rigorous, so it was unfortunate that I just had so much schoolwork. I was also traveling a bit for like some conferences, and yeah, like I said, I was getting books, meditation, and just like building a foundation for what I wanted to do in my life. So that kind of took away from it as well. I have no regrets for that, but if I do go into a startup, you can't be distracted. You just have to go into it fully, no matter what. So now we're in December. We've fast forwarded 2 months from actually picking the idea. So I was actually validating whether or not the technical information that I just told you about the iPhone and whether or not it can scan somebody's face, if that was actually true or not in reality. Because I hadn't tested that out. I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but I went 2 months into a startup and didn't even validate whether or not the technology existed. Yeah, my first steps at validating was 2 months in, which is something that you do day one, of course. So anyways, the iPhone can actually detect it. A lot of the data that it actually pulls from the IR sensor and the dot projection, it actually does work. I'm going to just go into more mistakes that I made since we're on the topic. Huge mistake that I made was, I'm not sure if this is like an ego thing or if it was just me just being kind of dumb, but you do actually need to look for competition and see if there are people within that space who have tried your idea before, who have failed at your idea, who are succeeding in your idea. And I know that sounds so obvious, but the reason why I didn't want to do that was because if somebody was doing it successful, then that means that I would have to compete with them. And yeah, I didn't like that. And it was just kind of like a maturity thing, I guess, something that I had to get over. I also wasn't validating the idea with other people. I was assuming a lot of the feedback that I thought I would get from customers. So I was building this imaginary product in imaginary world and saying, oh, they're going to like this, we're going to like this. But I had no actual validation of that. My last piece of mistake was not getting a co-founder, because having a co-founder is really nice for just holding yourself accountable with somebody else. And you're going towards a common goal. It's always better with somebody else. Okay, and then some of the successes, because I don't just want to go over mistakes. Some of the successes I found. This project specifically was a really, really, really good intersection of all of my skills that I've had gone over my life so far. So it was an inclusion of optometry, which my mom's an optometrist, so I had pretty good industry experience within that. Then it was also CADing, so like 3D printing and mechanics of materials, material science. All of that was in my curriculum. I'm a mechanical engineer. So really finding like the intersections for all these things was like super, super nice. And I really like that about the project, because all the things that I was doing, I actually had an understanding in beforehand, which is really speeds up the process. Other things that I did well was actually just like keeping my head down and just working. I didn't really tell people. Maybe I should have, just to get more initial accountability. But yeah. And so the last one is basically just like shifting my personal identity like internally towards more of a startup person. So I saw myself as an entrepreneur and I shifted that from engineering. All right, so now we're shifting gears and changing to January through April of 2024. So I went another 4 months, basically pretty distracted. Again, the main distraction point was just schoolwork. I don't know how to say this without upsetting my parents, but I really don't prioritize school anymore, and it's because of the fact that I was so distracted from school in the past 2 semesters. If you want to be a founder, you need to be very serious about the things that you do. So you need to deprioritize schoolwork, and you have to prioritize your startup. Like, no matter what, you have to. And so that's something I didn't do as well. So we're gonna kind of fast forward through January and April, but I made very slow progress that year, those months, and I did have a bit of like side projects that I was doing. I don't regret not doing those, because it was very engineering, very hands-on stuff. So I really like that. And I also taught myself the main takeaway from this was I actually just took a course in terms of like iOS and app building, because this product that I envisioned would involve an app. So I was like, dude, let me teach myself. I'm not going to outsource this. I don't have any money. I'm not going to hire a dev to do it. So I just learned iOS myself, and built several apps. None of them too technical enough to actually get like a full product sent at this point, but I was getting there. I was learning it. So I was making decent steps, but very, very slow. Okay. So now we're in April, and we're going to get to our first pivot. The first pivot is actually me realizing how difficult the technical behind the iOS app would actually be. So I realized it was really difficult, so I actually just wanted to pivot out of it. And instead of taking people's true measurements, I actually just wanted to solve the original problem statement, which was people were going into stores and not enjoying the options that they had, because it's a limited amount of options. So I kind of wanted to just expand the limited physical options to unlimited online. And think about it, that's not like a novel concept. And the fact that it hadn't been done before is probably a good telltale sign that it's a tar pit idea. But yeah, so that was something that I pivoted into. I officially named it Hastus, and just naming something actually helps a lot as well in terms of like your output with the work. Something I want to note is that as I progressed through the startup, I ended up having less and less of the original concept as I kept going through it. So I was like, shit, I can't do this anymore. This is too much time. I'm going to shrink it down to this. Also can't do that. Get rid of that. Like it could have been cutting out fluff, but it was also just having too much on my plate and thinking that I can do a lot in a short amount of time. So I really had to cut it down. And so I was going for basically no app and more just like a online framework that somebody could just kind of customize eyewear if they already had their measurements. So if they went into a store and got their, let's say, PD, which is pupillary distance. Okay. So I'm going, this is where actually things start getting really good. And this is the summer of 2024. So this is May to August. And this is when I can actually go full-time with a startup. So previously, all of this time I had spent doing schoolwork and other things and just having distractions. So now I'm like fully no distractions. I take the entire summer off. I say I'm not getting a job. I'm just going to do startup full time. I want to see what this is like. I want to see if I can actually pull off being a founder for an extended period of time. See if I can just lock in. So that's exactly what I did. And it was a very, very good summer, actually. So I originally started out with this mind map. And I'll probably show it on screen. Kind of this convoluted thing. I mean, dude, I don't know how to run a startup. So this is like what my college brain is thinking and my college education is getting me, because I've no formal education to being a founder other than maybe like some Y Combinator YouTube videos. So this is basically what it is. I'm like, okay, this is my plan of attack. Let's do it. I also created an investor pitch deck as well. So I was getting through things. I emailed a couple of like some Cooper alumni that I knew in the space and was like, how do I do a pitch deck? What do I need to add into this? They're like, okay, this. I'm like, okay, sounds good. One little note about that, I wish I didn't do it that way, because I was having people tell me what to put in my pitch deck rather than me figuring out that myself. Figuring out what goes into your pitch deck yourself is way more important than having people tell you what to do. So this is a little bit of the skepticism that I have with like mentorship within startups, because actually realizing something yourself is way more valuable than having somebody else tell you that. I'm moving into my parents' place for the entire 3 months. I was doing 10-hour days with 7 days a week. It was really nice because I didn't have to get like food and stuff, but living with your parents and being a founder is really great because your brain can just focus on one thing only. Like you can just diet with one single thought for an entire 3-month period, which was awesome. Okay, this is also when I started onboarding, and I wanted to get the co-founder involved. Again, this was something I realized really, really late into the process, just getting a co-founder. But yeah, so I reached out to basically 10 of my closest friends with some type of like, hey, I'm doing this startup. This is the basic concept of it. Would you be interested in it? 4 of them responded. 1 of them was actually like interested in doing it full time. So this is where Gaudi comes into play. Oh, I want to mention, actually, I wrote this down. I still have no product feedback from potential customers and industry professionals. So this is like 9 months in, and I haven't gotten a single bit of feedback from potential users. I don't know how that's possible, but please don't make that mistake. Please don't do that. So when I do onboard Gaudi, we do a couple changes. We have a pivot, and then we also change the name of the concept. Oh, I also gave Gaudi a 50-50 split. So I think that's really important as well. It's just, I've seen other co-founders like my age, and they don't do 50-50 splits. I think that's like just super shitty, because it's essentially saying that, one, my time is worth more than yours, or I'm more valuable. That makes no sense to me. If you're a co-founder with somebody, like, you should do 50-50 no matter what. Like, I just don't see that ever working out in a good way. And it's so early on in the concept that if you're being greedy for 60 or 70% rather than 50, then you're just not right for being a founder. Okay, one of the issues that I ran into with actually just onboarding Gaudi, and not having him part of the original concept from the beginning, was the fact that it felt like an onboarding rather than like the birth of a new idea. So it took him a while to actually get like acquainted with the concept, and it took a while for him to actually just care too, as much as I did. And yeah, so the next startup that I did, it was very important that we actually came up with the idea together, so then we both felt the same amount of motivation and passion for that idea, rather than it being potentially one-sided. Okay, during this time, so this was like kind of midsummer, the product was like basically built out, and I had some type of workflow in terms of getting from idea to final print, but I was having manufacturing issues because like it's just a rule with manufacturing where when you want to increase an order of precision, that also increases an order of magnitude within the money you spend for that printer. So what do I mean by that in like layman's terms? If you want something to have more tolerancing, so it needs to fit within a mil rather than like half an inch, you're then spending 10 to 100,000 more dollars on that printer. So because you want it to be extremely tolerant, you have to spend a lot more money. So I didn't have that money. I didn't have enough money to actually get a $500,000 3D printer. So I was outsourcing that and trying to find somebody to manufacture these for me. Eventually, I mean, you just cold outreach to a bunch of manufacturers, and they get back to you, and it's usually just some salesman who doesn't really understand the concept, and you just have to talk through them and set up calls and stuff. Eventually, I found this like kind of like small business 3D print shop in Canada, and the quoted price that I was getting was around $200 per frame. So the reason I bring up this whole manufacturing, this whole thing, the whole pricing, is the fact that one, I hadn't had done like a financial modeling on this yet, and then also $200 for frames from a base manufacturing level is ridiculously expensive. Most frames, even high-end ones like Tom Ford, Gucci, they all come from China, and they're all being made for close to around $15 to $20 before they get into an optometry store. So an optometrist is probably paying around $50 for them, and then when they get into stores, they're being charged at around $500, and there's obviously a bunch of leeway with that. But so anyways, their base manufacturing is around 10, let's say. I'm getting quoted for around 200. Quality-wise, they're about the same, so that's not something I have to worry about. Quality increase would be very difficult as well. But so quality-wise, they're about the same, and that's a huge problem. No optometrist is going to pay $200 for something that's just custom made. Like, there's not really a use case for that. And so that's a huge, huge hole within the startup boat that I'm in. That's something that's very difficult to actually patch up because you're at a loss, and even if I get the pricing down, it'll probably be to around 100 per frame, and I'm still an entire order of magnitude off from actually getting these to be the price that I want. So realizing this, having this realization was very, very late into the game, and this is something that you should be having day one, if I'm being honest. So I'm having this realization about 10 months into the startup. Now, granted, it was a little bit difficult to actually get there. I didn't really know what I was looking for. Now I do when I start a new startup. But yeah, verify that the pricing actually makes sense. Okay, so kind of went over the negatives for what's going on. Let's talk about the positives. The best part that Gaudi and I agreed upon within our workflow was actually these top of week PowerPoints. Every week, we would create a PowerPoint for each other for the things we're doing, the things we want each other to do, and the things we're going to do, like in terms of our progress, updating, and then future progress, like our plans, and just like refreshing our brains. We were remote, so this is the reason why we were doing it, and I guess it came up accidentally because if we were in person, we wouldn't have a need for these meetings because we'd just be meeting every day. But even if you're in person, and Gaudi and I do this now, if you're in person, you have to create top of week PowerPoints for each other to just like keep everybody on board. So summer goes by, I do a lot of work. I build out this entire workflow in terms of getting frames to be 3D printed, which is a little bit difficult because it hadn't been done before. So a lot of this stuff was new. I love just like sitting at a problem for weeks straight and then finally getting the problem. Being a founder, you're always going to be eating dirt and eating glass and just doing a lot of shitty things that you're probably not going to want to do. So how do you like kind of trick yourself into doing these things? And the way that I found it is by romanticizing the actual part of eating dirt, if that makes any sense, and like romanticizing the pain and struggle of being a founder. I don't know if that clicks with anybody, but it's just like a cool concept that I've been kind of like messing around with. And just like tricking your brain into enjoying the struggle is super, super powerful and can make you a very, very productive founder. So that was a big takeaway that I had over that summer. But yeah, eventually we decided to kind of throw in the towel, and I'm kind of summarizing a lot. Mainly it was manufacturing problems. Also there was kind of just a difficult product market fit. I don't think people would really want to pay for this product the way that I would want to pay for it. Something that I would use myself. But I don't think most people would use this. I think just like standard glasses going into a store works for most. So yeah. All right. And then yeah, I'll go into present day real quick. I don't have many bullet points. So now me and Gaudi, we've shifted to something else. We're doing social media marketing agency. I think it's going a lot better. And the reason why we actually started this was because we were having client acquisition problems within our last startup. And we realized that we weren't doing any marketing. We weren't doing anything at all. Even though the product wasn't built, we weren't actually going out and like getting people interested. So building a social media presence for us was like the way that we would have done it. LinkedIn, YouTube, short form on like Reels and TikTok and all that stuff. And so yeah, we want to help influencers and businesses do that themselves, and founders as well. Kind of like founder-led marketing in terms of your product, I think is a super, super important strategy and kind of a must in terms of the current like startup ecosystem. Okay, yeah. And then I did a no bullshit intro, so I will do a no bullshit outro. I don't really care about subscribers, I don't really care about views, but I do want your feedback. So if you listened through this the entire way, please tell me what you liked and what you didn't like. Yeah, that's it.